Welcome to Occupational Queerpy, a podcast run by an occupational therapy student exploring the intersection of occupational therapy and the LGBTQIA+ experience. This podcast offers personal perspectives for informational and educational purposes only. We'll be discussing a wide range of LGBTQIA+ topics, and to authentically reflect the community, we'll be using common and slang terms which some listeners may find explicit. Listener discretion is advised. And we are live. Live in the studio, everyone. Welcome to Occupational Queerpy. Today we will be talking about social determinants of health, and we have a special guest here. Hello, special guest.
Hi.
Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Kate. I'm an OT student here in Arkansas, and I am a lesbian.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your journey?
Okay. I can start about my queer identity, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a late-in-life lesbian. I grew up very religious, a very sheltered home. My parents weren't outwardly hateful, but, it was known that that's just not what we're supposed to do.
Right.
So, a lot of my feelings and thoughts got shoved under the rug. I did not want to be this way for many years, and I tried to change it for many years. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't do it. My family talked a lot about how badly they wanted me to get married. And even though they never said, you have to get married to a man, the picture was very clear.
Right.
I was supposed to get married to a man. I was supposed to have more than one kid. And then I was supposed to live happily ever after, ideally. But that did not happen. So I did end up getting married. I did marry a man. My family was stoked. He was my best friend. There's a reason why I married him. It wasn't, I think a lot of times people think that, as a closeted lesbian, especially ones that do marry men, it is just, they're fully miserable all the time. How could you not know sooner, or how could you not come out sooner? And I wasn't miserable all the time. We were absolute best friends. And it wasn't until I did get older, and no matter how perfect my life was, I could not be happy. I just could not figure it out. I knew how I felt about women, but it just felt like this extra little piece.
Mm-hmm.
And one day somebody asked me, you've made it so clear how you feel about women. You know that really well, but I've never heard you talk about how you feel about men. So how do you feel about men? And when I started thinking about that, that's when I put all the pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, although I did love my ex-husband, it wasn't the same type of love that people talk about.
Right.
I was happy with him as my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I did love him as my best friend. But whenever the pieces came together and I realized that the way that I loved him was not the same way that he loved me, and that's also not the way that spousal love should be, or romantic type of love should be, it kind of started to make sense that no matter how hard I tried to shove myself in that box, I just would never fit.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a box built for me.
Yeah.
I remember coming out to my mom during lunch in the middle of a workday. I was terrified. I was also terrified to tell her that I was getting a divorce, and I just remember we were sitting there over some queso. I hadn't even touched it yet, so that
tells you.
I'm sure she was nervous.
Red flags.
She was like, oh, crap, what is happening? And I finally just looked at her, and I went, okay, I have to tell you something. I am getting a divorce. And she kind of, her eyes got big, and then I said, because I'm gay.
Oh, that's a big lunch.
Yes, yeah. She was nodding, and I didn't know what to expect, but she started getting teary-eyed, and she was like, thank you so much for telling me. She's like, I'm so proud of you. I know this is hard. I'm here for you. And in that moment, I was like, I waited all these years for this. Like, what was I scared of?
Right.
But, I mean, it doesn't always go like that.
Right.
You know? Like, I was so lucky. Like, I do still have grandparents that don't talk to me. So it obviously, even within my own family, it could have gone so different.
Mm-hmm.
But that moment where I sat across from my mom and said out loud all the things that I had tried so hard to change, I can't even describe the freedom. It was like, you know, that ending in the book where like the sun is shining and they're driving away and like everything is just, it's fine. Like they escaped, they made it out. And that sounds so weird to say, like escaped, but it felt like that.
For
like
sure.
The work that I'd put in, I was like, I knew that I wasn't ever going to make it living that life. It just wasn't my life. And during that lunch, I realized, like, I can have my life. And then I went right back to work and finished my day. Like, and since then, like, I am very much one of those people that's very out, very proud. Like, if you meet me, you likely know that I'm gay. And you likely know that I was married to a man. Like, because I'm so proud of it. I didn't think I would ever make it out. Even my 4-year-old daughter, like, she knows. She just, Mom likes girls.
That's amazing.
And that's okay sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's really cool.
I love that.
Exciting.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
It kind of made me tear up when you were talking about your mom. I just, supportive parents, those always get me. Just hearing stories of just, like, them saying, I love you no matter what, and I appreciate you, like, sharing that with me, like, incredible.
Huge.
And I know you said, like, that's something you were just terrified to say, and I think we were talking about this, I was talking about it with Emily, like, another episode, but just, like, that minority stress, like, just being built, like, 20-something years
I was almost
of hearing.
30.
Yeah.
Like, going on
nearly 30
Yes.
years of hearing, like, man and woman, and then just hearing, like, all the homophobia.
It's disgusting. The word disgusting that, oh my gosh.
Like, that sticks with you.
Yes.
And when you hear it, like, from your family, whether it's directed towards you or not, it's going to stick with you.
Yes.
And, of course, there's going to be, like, that's where the fear comes from, like, sharing that with your parents.
Yeah.
Like, it was similar with me when I came out. My mom, she's like, basically the same thing.
Yeah.
We didn't have queso, though. But
Sorry. I didn't even eat the queso. I was so nervous.
But it was just, she's like, I love you no matter what. Like, I don't know. Yeah. We discussed this later. It was essentially just like, I love you no matter what. But when we discussed later, she's like, I'm just not sure why you didn't think you could tell me. And I was like, I'm like, where do I start? Like, there's just so many things I heard growing up that said, like, being queer is not okay. Yeah. And that sticks with you. And it's still, I personally still stuck with me, like, going to new places, meeting new people. When I meet a new man I don't know, my voice, like, drops an octave. I cannot help it. That's just how it is. Because I don't want him to know that I'm gay. Because what if he's not okay with that? That's unacceptable. But, yeah, that kind of stuff sticks with you. So the coming out process, like, I feel like unless you've done it or unless you're, like, queer, it's hard to describe. Because people are like, just say it. Like, it's not a big deal, but, like, a lot is riding on it. Like, that could make or break your family. You could get shunned. It's so terrifying. I think there's something to be said, too, for this idea that being straight is a default. That is something that I personally struggled with. Like, I felt like this massive burden to prove my sexuality. Like, for a while, like, I knew that I was into girls, and so there were several years that I would just tell people that I was bi. And at that point, like, it kind of sort of made sense for me, but it was all centered around the fact that I was into AFAB people. Like, and what does AFAB mean?
Assigned female at birth.
Yes.
Yeah. So just this idea, like, it put all this pressure for me to just prove, and all of my focus went into that, and it took someone just randomly asking me, yo, you haven't talked about how you feel about men. Like, how do you feel about that? Because it's just assumed, like, of course, like, you were born a girl. Like, of course you're going to be into guys. Right. If you don't, then you're, like, I had slept with guys, you know? Like, I had a baby. And so in my mind, like, it was possible
Mm-hmm.
for me to do that, it put a lot of burden on proof that should not be there.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I felt like I needed to make 1,000% sure before I even told anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And like later, my family did end up. They all processed it for a little bit, like maybe a couple weeks, and then they were all like, "Okay, but it's hard for me to accept this because like you were married," and I
Yeah.
still have people tell me that.
Yeah.
You were married to a guy, so you're not. There's no way you're just fully gay. Like you've got to be a little bit bi.
Right.
So, yeah, this idea that you're just straight by default kind of puts a lot of added pressure to that too.
For sure. Yeah. I think we talked about, I think the term she used was comp het,
Yes.
which is just like growing up, you're going to fall in love with a man, fairy tale Cinderella stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think it's pushed more on girls and women that like, that's what you're striving for. So
Mm-hmm.
even the thought, like, even if you have the ideas of liking girls, it's like, well, that's not the narrative that
Yeah.
people are telling you. So
Mm-hmm. Your value is placed on how men see you.
right.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know,
Yeah.
it's disgusting.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, gosh.
And I think that keeps a lot of, especially women, like you said, from coming out and like realizing that they are fully gay, because there is this sense of like validation and desire. Like some women do seek that, but they are not seeking the man himself. Like they are seeking his validation because they're taught that that's where
The
theirs is as
societal
well.
like
Yes.
standards that
So,
men
yeah,
place
and that is
value
hard
on
to
you.
separate.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference in wanting a man's attention and wanting a man,
Yes.
and some people never differentiate it.
Right.
And it's terrifying and sad.
So we're both OT students,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
So she is, 2 cohorts below me.
Yes.
But, fun
Yeah.
fact we have to share.
Yeah.
When I first started school here is 2022.
Mm-hmm.
I think literally the first day I was here, it was Kate's.
Yeah, like we
Was it-
started the same week.
Yeah.
I started working here the same week that y'all started class.
Yeah, so she worked at the school and we
Yes.
met, and I remember it so vividly. You were wearing like animal print.
Oh, yeah, I
And
had
you
those
were
animal
like
print.
stunning, like looked so good. Yeah, she was turning looks all the time.
I try to turn
But
looks.
yeah, we bonded even before
Yeah.
like you started the OT program. She was in OSA, the Office of Student Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just vibed there.
Yeah, I hadn't even come out at that point.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane to think about.
Yes.
Like, but yeah, we go way back.
We
We're
do.
good. So can you tell me, you were working here, right?
Yeah.
OT student, enrolled here as an OT student.
Mm-hmm.
So what led you to occupational therapy?
So I have a little bit of my background. My undergrad is in biology.
Same.
I was so close to having a double major in chemistry as well.
I'm sorry.
It's weird.
That's
right?
terrifying.
What a freak. So the plan was to go to medical school, either DO or MD, but I was leaning more towards DO because that's what's here, and I needed to keep my family here.
You are local, correct?
Yes, I've always been here, and so I had roots planted.
Right.
Still do. So I knew nothing about OT. I had been working in a medical lab for a couple of years during COVID, was starting to feel some burnout, and so I needed a change of pace, and that's what led me here. I needed some creativity in what I was doing. So the job in OSA, I did a lot of party planning. I was focused on making students' lives more enjoyable. Like
Right.
as that is OT.
So OT
I had
coded.
no idea. I didn't even know that OT existed. Nobody talked to me about it in undergrad. But the whole time that I was in the lab before I left, I just kept saying, I wish that there was a job that combined this like love of science that I have and healthcare and medicine and creativity. Like I need something that's kind of in between that. Like I want to make a difference. I want to stand up for people. I want to like foster this individuality for people and be creative in how I make their lives better. I just don't know how to do that. So fast forward, I start here the same week that y'all do. All the students, like there is this, you can look at a student on campus without knowing their name and you're like, they're an OT student.
Absolutely.
You know, like there's
Yeah.
just this thing about OT students. And so I immediately gravitated towards the program. Over the next couple of years, I learned more about OT and I was like, this is it. this is exactly what I've been looking for and had no idea that it existed. It's right here under my nose. And that was it.
Has your identity as a queer person, as a lesbian, has that impacted your journey to OT or like throughout the OT program?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that caught my eye at first was just how at first it just looked like they were accepting, but later once I learned more about OT, I just realized that OT is fully focused on each client as an individual. Like, it is all about that client, what makes that client's life meaningful and purposeful. And so it doesn't, like, sexuality, where most people would say, like, it doesn't matter, like, you're going to treat them the way that you're going to treat them. In OT, it does matter, but not in the sense of, like, I'm not going to treat you, or I'm going to treat you, I am going to treat you differently. You know, I'm going to treat you in this way because that's what's meaningful for you.
Right.
So I'm going to just lean into that more.
Like, you're not treating them differently because they're gay or queer. You're treating them differently because they are a different person.
Yes.
Because everyone's a different person.
Yes. And that's so beautiful to me. Like, for me, seeing a world that is full of unique individuals is stunning and so much more fun to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And OT helps do that. Like, we also have to advocate for people, and being a person who has felt like I needed to be advocated for, like, I want to be that for other people too. So yeah, OT is just, it's built for queers. Like, I know that's
so queer coded. OT is so queer coded, and it's incredible.
I was talking to Mr. Hansen recently, and he gave me a statistic. Did you know that there are more queer people in the field of OT than there are men?
That checks out.
Yes.
Honestly,
I think it's like 14%. Yes.
When I went to AOTA, I was just like, I'm not here to stereotype people. Walking around AOTA, the national conference, I was like, gay, 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 gay. And it was so incredible to see. Like, it made me feel so much better. And also, I love women. Like, OT is, like, I think 90% women, which is, like, my dream job. Like, when I go into work, I just want to see women, and I want to talk to women all day. Vibing with women, like, that's where my heart's at. That's what I grew up on. And
safe.
OT, very safe. It's so good. Okay, so topic of the day, social determinants of health. To start, I'm just going to give a definition of what SDOH is, social determinants of health. So social determinants of health, this is from the World Health Organization. They are non-medical factors that influence health outcomes, and they are a significant factor in queer health disparities throughout the entire lifespan. So there are individual level factors such as, your education or your religion, socioeconomic level, but then there's also those structural factors like government policies, healthcare systems, like being able to access those things. And I think, especially in today, we're filming this March 2025, I feel like that's, especially the structural, is super concerning in this time we're in right now. I just have some stats here that I kind of want to read out. Queer Americans have higher rates of poverty compared to non-queer counterparts, and there's particularly high rates observed among transgender individuals and bisexual cisgendered women. There's employment discrimination. Queer people face discrimination in employment, and that can lead to job loss, denial of promotions, workplace harassment, and that can contribute to, economic instability.
Which forces them to rely on federally funded health insurance.
Which potentially going away, so love that. Barriers to affirming care. Social and community contexts, like we face discrimination and violence. The housing instability. Queer people, particularly transgender individuals and youth, experience higher rates of homelessness and housing insecurity due to discrimination, family rejection. Queer people are going through it. Social determinants of health, I wanted to talk about this kind of early on in the podcast because that kind of affects everything. They're different parts of your identity, like your education, like what religion you grew up on, or if you didn't grow up in a religion, like what part of the world you're living in. I feel like in the South, the location itself is super impactful on the lives of queer individuals. Do you want to talk about any of your like social determinants of health? Have any of them in particular, like, can you think of a time where it has impacted you, or chronically, like, is it still impacting you now?
For me personally, like I'm straight passing, so that does make a big difference for me.
What do you mean when you say straight passing for the folks?
So when people see me on the street, like, I don't look like
the stereotype.
The word that comes to mind is dyke. Like,
you can say it, and you can say it.
Like, that's not what I look like. Mm-hmm. That's not what feels right for me. I don't wear a lot of makeup, but like, for the most part, like, I look like my classmates. I don't.
Yeah, like
I look like I would be married to a guy.
Yeah, like standard,
yes,
feminine presenting.
Yes. Longer hair.
Yes.
I wear, like, I poke my boobs out there. Like, I show my body.
Period.
Like, I'm proud of my body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Straight passing.
Yes.
I get it. I would like to think that I am straight passing when I don't speak. If I don't speak and I don't walk or use my hands, when I'm standing rigid and my mouth is closed, like, I would like to think I'm very masculine presenting.
Especially now that the golden mullet is gone.
Oh my gosh, when I first started school, when Kate first met me, I had a, like, probably shoulder length, permed mullet.
Gorgeous
golden, flow.
Like, Greek god, yes.
Was he straight passing then?
He was not. it was the mullet. I said, we're gonna be better.
Yeah.
We're gonna be so tight.
There's something about this one. No, we hit it off so fast. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, my queen, like, would go to OSA just to say hey, check in on the girl. And
I think before you were done checking in for orientation, we had already hugged.
Oh, yeah. That sounds correct. Yeah. It does. But we're talking about in an earlier episode just how to be affirming. And mm-hmm. Kate, before she even came out, she was an ally in OSA. And she had one of those, a safe space sticker, like, on her door.
Yeah, I tried to keep it on my door. I had one on my badge. Like, I had them everywhere.
Yeah, and I think, like, she was always, like, mm-hmm. she said we hugged, like, immediately. Yeah. So, like, I knew she was a safe space, but just having that sticker for people mm-hmm. who don't, they're just visiting OSA to, like, get some shit done.
Yeah.
Just seeing that sticker for a queer person would definitely, I would be more likely to enter a room if I saw a sticker like that.
Well, my whole job was to make sure that students were happy on campus, so sometimes students did need to sit down and vent, and who's going to do that if they don't feel safe?
Right. Queer people, they need to be happy too. Yes. Believe it or not, we enjoy happiness.
Among other things. Like, I'm straight passing, so they are a lot different for me, but I am on Medicaid currently and have experienced the difficulty in finding physicians. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not trying to get gender-affirming care or, like, any sort of, I'm talking just bare minimum, just finding the care that you need.
PCP, gender-affirming, or just, like, sexuality, queer-affirming.
Yeah. Or just healthcare.
Period.
Like, finding physicians that will accept Medicaid is hard. I was lucky enough to find like, my primary care doctor is queer-affirming. Which makes such a massive difference.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't have kids anymore. Like, I thought that I was at this point in my life where it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to have that much of an effect on me, but it does. I mean, the way that she asks questions to me, it makes such a huge difference. And simply because of that, I have felt comfortable and safe going to her for other health issues that I've found, like, that I have been dealing with for years. But we're trying to get it handled now. The one barrier that I'm facing, the largest barrier that I'm facing, is finding specialists that will take my insurance. Mm-hmm. So we've pinpointed the issues. We know exactly what needs to be done, and we still can't get them fixed because I'm on Medicaid. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's an issue for a lot of people. And like you said, I mean, people in the alphabet mafia, like, we are typically, like, lower income. The poverty rates are high. a lot of us are on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that being a single mom who is queer, with the state of the world right now, I worry about my custody. I worry about being able to financially provide for her because I'm a tatted queer. Like, who's going to hire me? Who's going to want to keep me around? Like, when I stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I am going to keep treating this person the way that they deserve to be treated. So there are, I didn't think that it would affect me being straight passing and late in life, but it does.
Mm-hmm. I grew up in the church, so religion is like one of the social determinants of health. In the South, my grandpa was the pastor of our church, and it was super impactful on, I think, the time at which I came out. It definitely held me back, among several other things, you know. But I think just growing up where I grew up in, like, the specific religion I grew up in, it was definitely difficult, and I didn't see people like me often. I didn't have a lot of friends, like, outside of, like, my family. I have a huge family. But outside of that, I didn't really, like, I never, like, went and stayed the night at people's places. I never was invited to, like, other people's birthday parties, which was fine because, like, I had a huge family. There was a birthday party every week. You know what I mean? But I think just growing up in that and not being exposed to other queer individuals, I never knew that queer was an option, if you know what I mean. So
that makes total sense. I was talking to a friend the other day about how I've never really had close friends, and, like, now as an adult in OT, I knew it was important, but, like, I'm trying really hard to be a better me so that I can be more available for other people. And one of the things that I'm working on is getting close friends. I've never done that before because the feelings that I had about my friends were different. Like, I didn't know what they were, but it never, like, I always felt uncomfortably close. Like, I didn't feel comfortable staying the night. Like, it just, you get that feeling, and I did not know at the time that that was normal. It was uncomfortable, so I avoided it. It felt wrong, so I avoided it.
Yeah.
And I do think that the reason it felt wrong was because of, like, growing up in the church. We're taught that our existence is bad.
Yeah. I remember going to church camp one year. I loved church camp. Like, it was so
I had
fun.
so much fun at church camp.
My least favorite part was, like, the sermons and stuff.
Yes!
I hope, Grandpa, Peepaw, I hope you're not listening to this. Because it was, like, a lot of fun. It was just, like...
Even the songs, like, the freaking... It's like a concert.
They went off. They did. They popped off.
Yeah.
But, like, growing up, like, my grandpa preaching, there was never, like, anti-gay, anything like that, you know, like, he never gave sermons like that. He's a very feel-good preacher. But I remember at camp, there was, like, a discussion we had. I don't remember how it got brought up, but they were talking about gay marriage. And it's like, no. Yeah. Like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, our denomination definitely doesn't do that. Like, that is not okay. Like, that is not normal. And we're not going to do something that goes against our traditions.
Yeah. My church had lots of talks like that. Lots of talks surrounding just sexual sin in general. And yeah, I remember the preacher talking, especially in youth camp, he kept talking about, for some reason, like, at the time, the media, it still is like this, what am I saying? The media, like, really plays up lesbians and, like, lesbians being lesbians for the benefit of men.
Yes.
And so that's how this preacher also talked about it. He's like, even if you're kissing your friend to impress the guy that you like, that's still a sin. It's wrong. It's gross. It's unnatural. Don't do it. And he wasn't even describing true lesbians. He wasn't even going into the emotion.
It's like the fetishization of men fetishizing lesbians.
Yes. Which so is just the act of
still through the male perspective. Can't even give women the POV. God.
It's my sin for me.
So these social determinants of health that we've kind of been talking about, has that impacted? I know we talked about healthcare, like it being a bitch just to even get healthcare, let alone like queer affirming healthcare. Oh yeah. So has these determinants of health, like religion or education, has that impacted your ability to engage in like desired occupations, or has it put a hindrance on occupations you have engaged in?
This is a new development for me, like really pushing myself out of the box and seeking occupations. I've had to take it into my own hands because I noticed growing up, not even just growing up, like even into adulthood, people just found themselves participating in meaningful occupations. I'm having to actively seek them because I didn't act the same way towards my friends, so I wasn't invited to do things. Therefore, I didn't develop the social skill that a lot of people naturally develop. I had to actively work on all of these things. I could talk for days about religion and the impact that had on me. I've fully deconstructed, and I think that I had to do that to come out. And I still carry some of that burden with me at times.
Yeah.
It definitely, I think that the biggest impact for me in multiple areas, but especially in occupations, it boils down to the confidence that I've never developed, hyper self-awareness, and not knowing how to engage in people out of fear of making them uncomfortable.
Right.
It just all kind of goes back to like everything that I was taught. And I mean, even in school, I grew up in a small town. The president of the school board was a very active member in the church. So like I couldn't escape it. Never escaped it. And it translated very poorly. I don't know how to like.
No, that makes
feels
sense.
Really jumbled and like.
No, it makes sense. I totally get what you're saying, but I definitely. There's some things like obviously like economic status is gonna impact like what you can and cannot do, but I feel like sometimes it's easy to overlook that just small things can like add up and those become barriers. Like your comfortability engaging in these things, I think it's easy to just like brush it off and not think about. But
well, and now like I have a kid. I'm fully grown now, obviously. But now I have a kid, and this impacts her as well because it also plays into my ability to connect with parents of kids that she goes to school with. Her teacher, like it's people see you differently. You don't want them to. Sometimes I do. Like I do want them to see that. I'm very proud about this part of me. Like I'm proud of being a lesbian, and I'm so happy that I made it out. But like when it comes to affecting her too, that quiets me. That shuts me down so quick because I don't want her to suffer.
It's frustrating, and especially I think you grew up in a small area, like of course, and you said you're straight passing, but word gets around. Like it is insane how word travels. Where'd you grow up? Okay, so also a tiny town.
Yes.
We played basketball against y'all, so we're both like really small, but word will travel. Like
I'm the girl that, oh yeah, she's gay now. Like
she's the gay girl, right? It's insane. It's crazy. And I try not to go, like I go visit my parents all the time and my family. I love them. But as far as going to events at school and like going to basketball games or my cousins are in homecoming, I just try to avoid that because I don't even want to give people the opportunity to like judge me. You know what I mean? I think that keeps me from seeing my family and stuff. I have cousins that were in homecoming court, and I'm like, I just don't. I don't think I can just like go do that. And the few times I've been back, I try to bring friends so I have like that support net. And like my family's there too, which is great. But I think it's just really hard going back to that environment, like where I grew up. And I am out and proud now, but when I go back home and I'm in like public spaces and I'm around people I grew up with, it takes me back mentally, you know, to where I wasn't out and proud and I was ashamed of myself and I hated myself. I just try to avoid it, you know, if I can. And I know in theory it's like, come on, Trent, overcome it. Like, let's go. Like, face your fears. It's a work in progress, okay? I'm working on it.
And see, I think, surprisingly enough, I think I'm a little bit of the opposite. So if I do have an opportunity to attend something, I will. I think for me, it's a lot, I'm very palatable for people. So it allows them to engage with somebody who is queer without them being just like uncomfortable and about to jump out of their skin the whole time, which is something that we shouldn't even think about, right? But it exists.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think about if somebody had left and they came out and then they were bold enough to come back. If I had seen them,
It's
if I
badass.
had just known, I might have figured this out a
Powerful.
lot sooner.
Yeah.
So if I can be that way for just one person, because I will also say being a straight passing lesbian, especially in a small southern town, the only lesbians that I ever knew of, they are very much that stereotypical. Both of them had mullets. Both of them wore men's clothing, never wore makeup. Like all of their hobbies and interests were all very masculine, which is great. Like that alone was empowering to see. But there was this thing about me where I was like, well, I mean, I like to work on cars.
Yeah.
I like to do these things, but I also look amazing in a dress and feel amazing in a dress.
Yeah.
I also love to put makeup on. So this representation of you can look any way. It's not about how you look. It's just about being you. And we do exist. That can be powerful. So as uncomfortable as it is for me sometimes, I do try to go back.
A brave soldier. Okay, so we spent a bit talking about social determinants of health, right? And I feel like with that, there's definitely, among other things, but there's definitely going to be trauma from that. So I think it's important to discuss trauma-informed care for occupational therapy practitioners listening. So trauma-informed care, what have you heard? Are you familiar?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so I don't think I learned, we may have touched on it in school, but I remember learning about it. I went for one of my fieldwork experiences. I went to Chicago and I worked at an engagement center for individuals experiencing homelessness.
Wow.
And the director there, she's an OT, and she really pushed for trauma-informed care. And now I kind of adopted it and I love it, and it just makes so much sense. But essentially, trauma-informed care, it recognizes that many individuals have experienced trauma and that this trauma can have lasting effects on physical, emotional, and social well-being. So instead of focusing on what's wrong with this person, it dives more into like what happened and like what can we do to like support. So they're like these core values. Let's say core values. So there's safety, creating a safe environment, physically and emotionally. Trustworthiness, building trust, so you're able to have honest conversations. Peer support, collaboration and mutuality. You're not treating this person, you're working with them. And I think that's pretty OT anyways. Like, I feel like it's more like we're in this together. Empowerment, voice, and choice, autonomy, giving them the ability to pick what they're doing. And then cultural, historical, and gender issues, which is recognizing and addressing the impact of these factors, which I think is huge in the queer community, and especially those with intersectionality of identities like people of color, trans people, how this can be applied and like for occupational therapy practitioners. So it helps us understand how trauma can affect a person's ability to engage in their occupations, such as self-care, work, participation, because that minority stress that we talked about, like it can be a hindrance for sure. And we kind of talked about it, but it can affect what you engage in, how you engage in it. And with OT, like incorporating trauma-informed care and acknowledging and addressing like these stressors can improve the relationship with the client and therefore just improve the improvements. So there are general principles that can be used for just like easy, quick, accessible tips for OT practitioners that are queer specific for creating like a trauma-informed space. So affirming language, pronouns makes sense. I feel like that's super impactful. Just being aware that these individuals like, this doesn't even have to be queer specific, but just like being aware that everyone has some kind of trauma of some sort, but recognizing the impact, queer specifically, of like discrimination, prejudice, societal stigma, and how that affects like our physical and mental health, and therefore affects our occupational engagement, you know? Creating a safe and accepting space for these individuals, just so they're allowed to be them true selves. And like when you are able to be fully present, like in your identity and yourself, I feel like that just automatically improves like your ability to like participate, and then therefore improve. There's also, on top of that, not just like creating like a safe space for clients, I feel like it's important to create a safe space for colleagues.
Yes.
And then like other people around you.
14%.
14%
of OTs.
86 more percent to go. We're getting them. We're going to get them all.
That's more than the national average, by the way. We are more queer as OTs than we are
as a population.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
I love it.
Let's keep these good vibes going. So I think you definitely did a good job. Can you think of any time specific, like either in the OT program or when you worked in OSA, any job you've had, where you have created a more queer affirming space?
Something that I've always tried to do is, and this, it was before I even knew about OT, but it's very OT.
Yes.
It's just focusing on the person. We have a tendency to assume a lot of things. I mean, I talked earlier about, like, there's this societal expectation that, like, straight is default. So even down to, like, people see that I have a kid, they immediately ask about my husband. Immediately. And I get put in this position where I'm like, well, do I tell them? Do I not? Like, how are they So that is all this stress that I'm feeling right off the bat meeting somebody. And to be honest, like, if somebody does that, I do question how open I can be with them from there on out. So I think just trying to stay aware of assumptions that we might have and avoid kind of putting them out there, and just focus on getting to know that person as an individual. Let them tell you about their life. Don't fill in the blanks.
Right.
People love to talk about themselves, you know?
I don't. I hate it.
I'm just, like, the interest that if you can show that you are interested in that person for who they are, then it gives them this opportunity to just take a deep breath and be like, okay, I don't have to put up this wall anymore. Like, she just wants to know who I am, and it doesn't matter what I'm going to say. Like, I can't give a wrong answer because the only answer that I can give is just who I am. Yeah. That's all she wants to know.
Active listening, right? Yeah. So I really like how you described it as don't fill in the blanks. Just let them tell you. Yeah. It's a good way to look at it, because I know it's easy to, like, get into the routine, like, whatever setting you're in. I feel like it's easy to get into that routine of, like, okay, I've seen this kid before, or I've seen this stroke patient before. Like, I know what to do with them, where to put them. But, yeah, like you said, it's good to get their story, like, hear it firsthand from them, and then, it's like, okay, I can incorporate this into treatment. And I think it just makes, like, a more impactful therapeutic process. Yeah, I think both ways. Like, it's definitely going to help the patient, it's definitely going to help you, and it's just going to make things flow so much easier.
It also kind of creates this opportunity for you to learn things that you would never think to ask. Like, at this point, we know, ask for pronouns, ask for a preferred name, but if you're not in this community, there are a lot of questions that you may not know to ask, or there are a lot of assumptions that you might not realize you're making, and you really might not realize that they have a negative impact, and they're standing in between you and your clients. So just having this habit of questioning every time you're filling in the blank and being extra aware of it, it does create this space where you might learn something new. Yeah,
I love that.
Our community is really fun and amazing, so
we get that a lot. I've heard that so much. We're a good time. We really are. So I have just, like, some examples of how we can create, like, a trauma-informed space in different settings. Because I know there's, like, 5 million and 2 OT settings last time I looked,
Wow.
something like that. So 5,000,003. I just got word. Someone just called in. So, for example, like an inpatient rehabilitation, if you're doing ADL training, and a transgender client recovering from a stroke may have difficulty with ADL tasks related to gender expression, such as binding,
Yep.
makeup application. So OTs can provide training and support for these tasks, ensuring that the client feels comfortable and affirmed, and I feel like stuff like that is difficult to approach, or it can seem difficult to approach, but I think that's where that rapport building comes in, and getting to know the client. You're not going to have to know how to bind. You're not going to have to know how to do that, but being
and there
able...
are how many ways to do that?
Exactly.
You're going to have to ask them, like, how do you typically, like...
Yeah.
It's different for everyone.
Like, that is the opportunity. Like, don't shy away.
Yes.
Be like, I am not experienced with this. I've actually never had someone who's needed help binding. Can you, like, show me how to do it? Tell me how to do it? Point me in the right direction, because I want to learn more about this.
Yeah.
And I think that can be super impactful. Especially, it was really easy to just hit the normal things like, oh, you need to shower. Oh, you need to bathe.
Even showering and toileting can be, for somebody who's genderqueer,
Yes.
my gosh, when somebody's having to watch you and help you when you're already so comfortable with your body, like, you seeing it is stressful enough, knowing that somebody else is about to have to see this and help you. It's,
Yeah, for sure. Outpatient care. OTs deal with work. That's an occupation, right?
Yeah.
So workplace accommodations and discrimination. A client experiencing workplace discrimination due to their sexual orientation may be struggling with anxiety and depression. OTs can help the client develop coping strategies, advocate for workplace accommodations, and connect them with legal resources. And that makes sense.
I think about pediatrics too, especially with outpatient. I think that it's kind of touchy for people to talk about minors.
Sexuality with minors.
Yeah, but not just... Sometimes it's about being affirming with their support system too. So maybe your client doesn't fall within the community at all, but maybe their parents do. Maybe they have loved ones that do. And if their loved ones don't feel safe with you, they are also not going to feel safe with you.
Yeah. Geriatrics, historical trauma, older queer people have, like, been through it. And I think, like, if you're in a nursing facility or something, creating a safe space for clients to share stories, validate their experiences, and provide support for processing the trauma. Because I feel queerness it's still... Like, obviously, there's pushback.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much pushback still. But I feel we've definitely we've made way in terms of being able to discuss queerness. And I feel the older queer population specifically, didn't really have that growing up. So being a safe space for an older person to discuss their queer identity could be super validating, because I feel like in nursing facilities, social isolation, that can be so real, especially if someone of a minority population, such as the queer community. So being a space for your clients or your patients, your people, to, hey, you can come talk to me. Like, you may not have been able to talk about this before, but if you ever want to, I'm here. I think that's super powerful.
I thought about this the other day too, because like you said, that age group specifically, like, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for them to explore that or think about it at all. So they might not even know to come talk to you in the first place.
Right.
So sometimes encouraging that, like, playfulness and, like, just minor comments here and there about, you can wear that. Clothes don't have gender. You can wear whatever you want. You've earned that right. Just encouraging them to express themselves, whatever that looks like. It is never too late to seek individuality.
Absolutely.
And learn who you are.
I love that.
Yourself. So
I love that.
just give them the opportunity to learn more about themselves so that they do know when to come talk to you.
Yeah. And the worst that could happen, they just have more fun.
Yeah.
Like, if they're not queer or it doesn't apply to them, well, you're just having fun then.
I think about Kurt Cobain a lot. He was, like, very straight, but wore dresses on stage all the time.
And he looked great doing it.
Amazing.
He looked so good doing it.
Amazing. So, like, just giving them the opportunity. It may not even be about sexuality. Like, sometimes we hone in on sexuality and gender expression, but it's really just about self-expression and freedom, you know? Everybody needs that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so I think we're getting close to wrapping this up. So, key takeaways from this episode, I think, would be obviously social determinants of health and how they impact queer individuals. Yes. They impact everyone, but queer individuals. It's a gay podcast, guys.
Yeah.
Like, so I think just being able to address those and be able to understand the individual, of course, but discussing those or being aware of those when treating clients, getting to know the client for who they are. And this is social determinants of health will come with that.
Yes.
But learning about those will help you interact with any client, specifically for this podcast, queer clients, because we love the gays. So I think I talk about cultural humility all the time. Have y'all learned about so much? We love talking about cultural humility. But yeah, I've talked about that a few times on the podcast, but just encouraging that critical self-reflection, you know, it's uncomfortable. Even as a queer man, I find myself, I need to reflect on biases that I have. Not only like biases I've learned growing up, biases that may be developing. I'm like, why? I have to reflect. Exactly. I'm like, why am I thinking that? Like, I think it's important for everyone, queer people, straight people, everyone, to reflect on your own biases, even reflect on your own social determinants of health. Like your education growing up, where you lived, your socioeconomic status, your religion, like how has that impacted and created the identity, the person that you are today? Yeah. I don't think that ever hurts.
No. I think it's easy to think about if this one minor thing in my life changed, what would my life look like now? And that really puts it into perspective how impactful these social determinants of health can be.
Huge.
One tiny change. Like if I grew up in New York City, for instance, instead of Arkansas. Can you imagine?
I thought about that. I have thought about that all the time. Yeah, I used to think about that all the time. If you can leave the audience with one thing to take away, I feel like we threw a lot out there today. Yeah. But if you can tell the folks what you want them to take away, if they can take away one thing.
From me, I think it is never too late to learn. It's always okay to not know something. So don't let that scare you away from learning. And then continue to check with yourself. You can't assume that you know something just because you know a gay person. You can't assume parts about somebody's life just because you see it on a regular basis. Just continually check in with yourself. Always seek knowledge about yourself and about others. And be okay with being wrong. It's not bad.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's good. It's okay to be wrong.
It is okay.
It's encouraged to be wrong. That's how you learn. Like when
I wouldn't know what it's like to be wrong, but
I personally have never been wrong, but I hear it's super helpful. So I want to thank you, Kate, for coming on. You were amazing. I'm glad we could learn about social determinants of health together. Yes. And thank y'all for tuning in. And I guess that's it. Yeah. Should we end on a song? Just off the top of your head.
I mean, Chapel Run is high up there for me.
Which one? All of them. Whole discography. Play out Pink Pony Club, instrumental version so we don't get sued.
Yeah.
Pink Pony Club, I'm gonna keep on dancing at the Pink Pony Club. I'm gonna keep on dancing. Okay, that's all y'all are getting.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, see y'all. Thanks for tuning in.